Welcome back, focused learners, to another explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the high-stakes science of property restoration. We usually think of a flooded basement as just a messy inconvenience, right? But the reality? It's a whole lot more complex than that. We're going to use Mason, Ohio, as our ultimate case study today. It's got a very specific set of environmental and architectural challenges, making it the perfect lens to understand the invisible ticking clock that starts the absolute second water escapes its bounds. So what actually happens the exact moment a pipe bursts in your home? Naturally, we tend to fixate on that growing puddle on the floor. But the real threat? It's completely hidden. The second that pipe gives way, this rigid, unforgiving scientific timeline kicks off. Water immediately goes on the hunt, seeking out the driest materials in the room. We're talking your drywall, your insulation, the subflooring. It's a purely physical reaction, and honestly, most homeowners are totally unprepared for it. Which brings us to arguably the most critical number in water mitigation, 60. You have exactly a 60-minute window before moisture deeply penetrates that drywall and subflooring. Water is, well, it's incredibly lazy, but it's highly destructive. Within that golden first hour, it isn't just resting on the surface. It's being actively, greedily absorbed. Speed is absolutely the most important factor here, because if standing water isn't extracted within those 60 minutes, the actual physical structure of your home begins to fundamentally change. Section 1. Anatomy of water damage. Local threats. You see, water damage doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's heavily driven by the local environment. Take Mason, for example. The soil there is super clay heavy, meaning it literally expands and shrinks with the weather. This movement cracks home foundations, basically handing groundwater an open invitation right inside. Then you've got those brutal winter freeze-thaw cycles that notoriously burst pipes in unheated spaces. Add in the Little Miami River nearby for storm flooding, and oh man, the aging clay tile sewers in older neighborhoods, they're practically a recipe for catastrophic sewage backups. It's a perfect illustration of how your local environment can actively work against your home's defenses. Section 2. The race against time. Okay, so we talked about hour 1, that's structural saturation, but let's skip ahead just a bit to hour 24 or 48. This is when microscopic mold spores, which are literally always floating around in the air, find that fresh new moisture and set up shop. They begin to colonize. If the water isn't dealt with, your home essentially transforms into a biohazard in just 1 to 2 days, no joke. To beat this, restoration pros have to achieve complete structural drying by day 5 to 7. It's an incredibly tight window to halt what is basically a full-on biological and structural disaster. Section 3. The science of restoration. To actually win this race, technicians rely on psychrometrics. It sounds intimidating, but it's basically the science of how air temperature and humidity affect drying rates. By precisely controlling those two factors, they can dictate the evaporation rate, literally forcing water out of hidden wall cavities and dense wood. So they aren't just, wiping down a room with mops and buckets. They are engineering the room's entire atmosphere to mathematically guarantee moisture extraction. It's wild stuff. And this is exactly why no two floods are the same. Water damage is strictly classified by its contamination level. Category 1 is clean water, like from a broken supply line. Pretty straightforward. Category 2 is gray water. Think overflowing washing machines or dishwashers. So it has some level of contamination. But Category 3, that's black water. We're talking sewage backups or river flooding. This category dictates the entire scientific response. You can't just dry out Category 3 damage. The biological threat is so extreme that porous materials literally have to be completely removed and destroyed. Now, alongside the waters category, professionals also measure the class of saturation. Class 1 is minimal, maybe just a small spill. Class 2 hits whole rooms, soaking the carpet. Class 3 comes from above, like a totally saturated roof leak. But Class 4 is fascinating. This involves specialty materials that absorb and release water very slowly. Think about downtown Mason, with all those gorgeous historic homes, right? Original hardwood floors, classic plaster walls. They fall right into Class 4, which means they require highly specialized, painstakingly slow drying techniques just to save the historical integrity of the architecture. Section 4. The 3-step recovery process. The protocol to handle all of this is super rigid. Step 1 is inspection and extraction. And they don't just, look around with flashlights. They use thermal imaging cameras to actually see the water hiding behind your walls, which is then followed by massive industrial-scale extraction. Step 2 is structural drying and monitoring.
This is where they deploy commercial dehumidifiers and air movers to alter the room's psychrometrics, like we talked about earlier. Finally, step 3 is final inspection and documentation. This step is absolutely critical for your insurance, generating the hard data needed to mathematically prove the home is structurally safe. In fact, the industry standard is incredibly strict here. The rule is we do not consider the job finished until moisture readings return to normal. Professional restoration experts don't really care if a wall looks or feels dry to the touch. That doesn't cut it. They rely entirely on daily calibrated hygrometer readings. Ultimately, the science dictates the finish line, not the naked eye.
Section 5. Navigating costs and insurance.
So, how does all this science impact your wallet? Well, it directly drives the economics of your insurance claims. Right now, the average water damage insurance claim in Ohio sits between $3,000 and $10,000. And remember that golden 60-minute window we discussed at the very beginning? Delays in that single first hour are exactly what makes this number skyrocket. The longer water just sits there, the more materials cross over into unsalvageable territory. Plus, mold colonization starts faster, adding a whole separate, very expensive layer of remediation costs. And what does insurance actually cover anyway? Well, they generally cover sudden disasters, like a storm ripping off your shingles or a pipe suddenly bursting. But if you treat a leaky sink pipe like a mildly annoying roommate and just kind of ignore it for 6 months, yeah, insurance is likely going to deny that claim due to neglected maintenance. You also have to specifically endorse your policy for things like sewer backups. Understanding the distinction between a sudden accidental disaster and an ignored gradual leak is literally the difference between a fully covered claim and a massive out-of-pocket nightmare. Which leaves us with one final, critical question to ponder today. If a pipe burst in your home right now, are you prepared for the next 60 minutes? Do you know exactly where your main water shutoff valve is? Do you know who to call before that golden hour expires and the structural saturation really takes hold? Remember, the science of water damage doesn't wait for anyone. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, Focused Learners. Stay curious, stay prepared, and I'll catch you next time.